Okay, so this video is going to aim to explain the training family tree, and it's the exercise progressions that we use from exercises like the snatch and clean and jerk and where they fit in the exercise progressions overall, and then the kind of big bang lifts that we aim to get each of our members to: the hinge, the pull exercises, squats and pushes. And then we'll go down and have a look at the accessory exercises. The idea really is to give an impression that not all exercises are created equal. There's a progression that you'll see from the snatch and clean and jerk. We're not necessarily aiming to get our clients to be able to do these lifts, but how these lifts are performed really impact on the coaching points and why you would do these exercises certain ways. And sometimes that's missed in overall exercise progressions because we don't necessarily look at these two lifts and understand that this really, if you were to look at these as the first generation kind of grandma and granddad of the family tree, the exercises you'll see here in hinge, pull, squat and push are really versions and broken down versions and descendants of these exercises. So as you'll see, that'll change the way that you might actually look at doing the exercise or the way that you do the exercise. The accessories are all the little bits that you'll need to be able to do these big four exercises. So let's take a look first of all at snatch. Really the aim when you do this exercise, and if you were going to get towards it, it's taking a heavy weight from the floor and then getting it overhead as soon as possible. So you're looking at the ability to have range of motion, flexibility, stability, which is what we'll call a lack of wobble. So knees and hips and back are stable. Being able, first of all, to produce slow force strength, and then to be able to do that in a coordinated fashion where lots is going on at once, and then produce it in a powerful way. So you'll see here the aim isn't to get necessarily our members to these exercises, but you'll see when you do them that it does change how you'll do the previous exercises. So if we look at snatch here, I'll give you a repetition in real time first. And then if you look at the second rep and we break it down a little bit, you'll start to see what I mean by the descendants of the exercises. So from this position here and on the first lift, this is obviously a deadlift or hinge exercise that you do conventionally in the gym. And then this position here, you could see where you might do the bent over row. Deadlift position now moves into an RDL where you hinge forward. So anyone who's done a stiff leg deadlift or hinge movement, that's where this exercise would work in. And this is really where that's broken down from in the overall exercise progression of things. There, that second phase, you'll see the pull, which is from here to here, where the arms and back really, primarily, the back pulls on the bar and the arms follow through. So that's your pull exercise up in this case. And then the last phase of the lift turns into an overhead press and a squat exercise. So press overhead to keep the bar up there and then full squat. One of the things you'll notice from the snatch exercise and the other big lifts is the importance of keeping the bar above the crown of the head and the torso being upright in the squat. Sometimes a squat gets taught incorrectly with a lean forwards and the hips being pushed backwards. The problem with that becomes trying to stay upright with the bar, whether it be on your back in front on a front-loaded squat or overhead, or even a goblet squat. You're not going to be in the right position to be able to hold the bar up. So the reason that we coach a squat with feet slightly turned out and the abdomen down in between is because it's a descendant of this exercise, and the idea is that you absorb the force straight down the line through the heels. If you're pushing these too far forwards and the weight comes onto the toes, that's a problem, obviously, because it's going to put too much tension through the knees, but it's equally a problem to push the hips too far back and lean forwards because then you get lower back issues. So it's trying to balance out between the two. So there's snatch. And then the other version of that is a clean and jerk, where you've got a weight, and because it's very heavy, you're going to go over two movements. And the range of motion, flexibility is required again, stability, strength, coordination, and power. So these are kind of your top end exercises. Quick rep first, same setup, under the bar, front squat, and then here the bar goes overhead and crown of head. So just to slow that down on the second one. hinge deadlift movement again, here. And then it's RDL based movement, or what you might use as a bent over row, another one of the big bang exercises that's used to generate hip and back strength for a progression towards this lift, the clean and jerk. Then the pull. The grip here obviously is narrower than with the snatch because you're going to catch at the shoulders. And then this is your squat, front squat, and it's the ability to absorb that force straight down the line through the heels. And obviously if we're here, limp forwards and push the hips backwards, then you're going to end up losing the bar out the front, so it doesn't work. The chest has to stay up. And then push overhead. So the hinge, the pull, the squat, and then the press finishes overhead. And that's the clean and jerk. So then if we look at the descendants of these exercises, now you'll see the conventional things that we might do in the gym have some specific coaching points and way that we do them. So if we look at the hinge first, we could go from deadlift, which is the big bang exercise, which now you see is just a descendant of that first pull coming off the floor. It's a simple breakdown of that exercise. So from here to here is that first pull exercise. Here you're looking at a degree of flexibility, you need stability and a lack of wobble, and it's slow force, but you don't necessarily need the full coordination and power that you'd use for the snatch and the clean and jerk. And here you've got a progression where if someone finds it difficult to do that deadlift, we might just go with the stiff leg deadlift or a trap bar hip extension all the way down to a hip thrust exercise, for example, is the same movement as the standing deadlift, but it's just made simpler because you've got your back on a bench and you don't have to hold the body position. So if someone's struggling at the moment and they need more development in terms of their flexibility and stability, we could use this version of the exercise to make life a bit simpler. And then while we're on that, if that was the case and someone was struggling with the flexibility of a deadlift, we might know that their upper back rounds. So here we can go into the accessory exercises for their thoracic or scapular area, upper body exercises. And let's say we want a bit more mobility to pull their shoulder blades back. Here we might use the scapular push-up in a warm-up to get them used to squeezing their shoulder blades together and generating the strength that they need to be able to put their back in the position for that primary lift. So if we come back out of there, that would then let us progress them to a level where they're good for their hinge. Again, if they then lack in the strength to be able to hold their shoulders back, we might go into the strength exercises and put these after their primary lifts and use exercises that help pull the shoulder blades back. So this might go in a person's program if they were struggling to get the shoulder position. Here there's a bit more resistance provided by the TRX, so Y position, squeezing back through the shoulder blades. And the order of the exercises, we put the scat push-ups in the warm-up. Then you'd aim at your primary lift, which might be the hip thrusters as part of your overall exercise program. And then we put these in after, before doing the conditioning, to make sure the shoulders are as strong as we need them and they improve over time. So that's how we might progress the hinge overall. On that same day in the program, you're going to have some version of your pull exercise. So you see now where the pull comes from when you look at clean and jerk and snatch. Now it's that deadlift position, and we'll pull the bar in towards the torso. So you can see where that comes from when you revert back to the snatch, that position, the snatch or the clean and jerk, really. If we went back to clean and jerk and look for that position, that then has to be done powerfully and quickly. You can see where that position is then replicated by the bent over row to be able to get someone to be successful and strong enough to achieve these positions. Again, not necessarily that would get everybody to do these exercises, but it's useful to understand where the progression comes in. So then any version of the pull exercises, you might use a pull-up, or rather pulling the bar up, which is an upright row. This would help achieve back strength, but again with that same aim of being able to pull the shoulder blades back and then move the body and move the bar through a certain range. And there's also pull down exercises like body weight pull-ups, but again, looking to achieve the same thing, back strength, so that you could move that bar around your body. And if we're in the progression and someone's struggling to do the barbell row that we just looked at, then obviously this position on the barbell row can easily be replicated and reverted back to, if we look at the position here, that's the position we're trying to achieve. If someone struggles with holding that position with 2 legs, then we'll revert them back to a dumbbell row. And you see this is exactly the same position, but you've got the bench for support. But that's where that fits in. It's a regression that you could use for a month as you get the shoulder strength and stability you need over time. That takes care of the pull. Squat exercise, one of the more technical versions, overhead squat, reverting back down to front and back squat, all the way down to step up. So this shows you the progression. A step up really is a squat. It's just a different version. It's that version of using a single leg rather than double legs for hip and knee extension. And the squat that we're looking for, now we know we've got to keep the torso up. So trying to lean forwards while you do a squat isn't really going to work, and pushing the hips back isn't going to work because we know the bar's got to stay right above the heels. So there, if we pause at the bottom, you can see where the weight stays back here to make sure that you've got the torso as upright as possible. And then if that's difficult for someone, we might revert them back to a goblet squat, for example, with the weight out in front slightly so that the movement can be achieved without having to hold the bar on the back. With the weight out in front here, that makes life a little bit easier. And you can practice keeping your torso upright. If that's still too difficult for a person, we can revert somebody back to a step-up exercise and just practice using single legs with either a high or low step to achieve the same goal. So you see here, that's the same essential movement on this leg that you're looking for out of the squat. If you look at this position, that's the same squat position. If you ignore that back leg, it's just a squat practice. And it achieves the strength over time for that squat movement. And then finally the push. Ideally, we want to get the bar right overhead, above the crown of the head, like we saw in that clean and jerk exercise. So here, when pushing, the torso moves forwards and the bar ends up over the crown of the head. And that's why we use that push exercise. Again, if people struggle with that thoracic stability and the movement needed, then we might revert them back for a slightly easier version of the exercise to begin with, and we can do it in a seated or kneeling position so that they don't have as much stress through their back. Here, feet can go behind and you can practice getting the movement. And again, if that thoracic is a problem, we're going to put in their warm-up here. We need to get more mobility. So again, we might use the same exercise as before, the scapular push-ups, or if they're struggling, we might use the foam roller. Foam roller in the middle of the back during the warm-up to get some thoracic extension, to get them moving so that they've got the ability to then turn up for that exercise on shoulders, overhead press, and then start to get this extension needed rather than relying on lower back. So that's the purpose of those exercises, going into the warm-up and going into the strengthening exercises that then progress over time. Same thing for the core. If there's mobility issues around the hips, we can use the hip exercises to make sure people can really sit deep into their squats, for example. This would go into a warm-up. Practicing those hip exercises. And then the same goes for if they've got stiffness or tightness around the lower limb. We can use warm-up exercises around the calf in those three areas to make sure that we've got the exercises right for them to get the right level of mobility. That's if there was stiffness in around the calf here. So we'll use exercises from these three: upper back and shoulders, core and hips and lower limb for people's warm-ups and accessory exercises. Then we'll get them through the 4 big exercises for the day for what they can currently achieve, knowing that we'll change the coaching points based on where the exercises actually originate from. That's the idea of the overall progression.